Welcome back. If you've been here before and if this is your first time, then brace yourself. You're not just watching another video. You're stepping into Canada's darkest hallways. On this channel, we don't just tell ghost stories. We uncover them. We bring you the real places, the real encounters, and the real nightmares people live through. So before we open the first hotel door, make sure to subscribe if you think you can handle what's waiting on the other side. Turn on the bell because the next haunting might be closer than you think. And if you've ever stayed in a hotel that felt off, comment below, because you might not have been alone. Now check in, leave the lights on, and remember, some guests never check out. Haunted Hotel Number 1, Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, Banff, Alberta. The Fairmont Banff Springs is one of the most iconic hotels in Canada. Nestled in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, it looks like a castle pulled straight from a postcard. But inside its grand halls and quiet rooms, there are stories most brochures will never mention. The hotel opened in 1888 as a luxury stop for Canadian Pacific Railway passengers. Over time, it gained a reputation not just for elegance, but for unexplainable events. Multiple rooms are rumored to be haunted, but one in particular stands out. A room so disturbing, hotel staff reportedly sealed it shut for years. Guests have reported waking up to find figures standing at the foot of their bed. One woman claimed she saw a man in a 1930s suit walk through her room wall and disappear. Another guest woke in the middle of the night to the sound of a baby crying, even though no children were checked into nearby rooms. When she called the front desk, she was told that no one else had reported any noise. The crying didn't stop. But the most well-known ghost at Banff Springs is the bride. She died on her wedding day. According to the legend, she tripped on her gown while descending the staircase, fell and broke her neck. Since then, countless guests and employees have claimed to see her figure, still in a flowing white dress, gliding down the stairs or standing silently in the ballroom. Staff have heard music playing from the empty hall. Some even reported catching glimpses of her in mirrors. She never speaks. She never screams. She just moves as if she never left that moment. There's also the ghost of Sam the bellman. A longtime employee who worked into the 1970s and loved his job so much, many believe he came back after death. Guests have claimed an elderly man in uniform appeared at their door to help with luggage, only to vanish when they turned to thank him. The Fairmont Banff Springs is still fully operational. It books thousands of guests every year. But if you listen closely after midnight, the halls tell a different story. The lights may be warm. The rooms may be clean. But something else is walking those upper floors. Something that never checked out. Number 2, the Fairmont Chateau Laurier, Ottawa, Ontario. The Fairmont Chateau Laurier sits proudly near Parliament Hill in Ottawa. Its grand architecture draws tourists and politicians alike. But behind its elegance is a story most guests never hear. Just days before the hotel was set to open in 1912, its owner, Charles Melville Hayes, boarded the RMS Titanic to return to Canada for the grand opening. He never arrived. He died at sea when the ship sank. The hotel opened without him, and some say it never recovered from that moment. Staff have reported the elevator stopping on floors with no one inside. Lights flicker in suites that haven't been booked. Guests have told front desk workers that they feel watched in their rooms, especially on the upper floors where Hayes was expected to stay. One housekeeper described walking into a suite to find the curtains drawn shut and the temperature freezing cold. She turned to leave only to hear a voice whisper her name. When she checked the hallway, it was empty. Security footage has captured movement in locked areas. Doors opened slowly on their own. A guest once called reception in the middle of the night to complain that someone was knocking loudly at her door. When security arrived, there was no one in the hallway. But the camera showed a faint shadow standing just outside the room minutes before. Many believe Charles Melville Hayes never left. That he walks the halls of the hotel he never got to see opened. Others say he is not alone. Some rooms give people nightmares. Others report waking up and not being able to move, as if someone is sitting on the bed beside them. The staff have learned not to question the noises, the shadows, or the sudden chills. They just accept it as part of the building's story. One guest summed it up best in a review. "It's a beautiful hotel, but it feels like someone's always one step behind you." Number 3. The Sir Sandford Fleming Inn, Lindsay, Ontario. The Sir Sandford Fleming Inn in Lindsay, Ontario, is more than just a charming historic hotel. It's a place steeped in mystery and ghostly tales. Built in the late 19th century, the inn was originally a grand Victorian mansion owned by prominent local families. Over time, it was converted into a hotel that welcomed travelers and visitors to this quiet town. The building's haunting reputation largely stems from its long history as a home and later a public space where countless people passed through, lived, and sometimes died. According to local legend, the spirit of a woman named Agnes haunts the hotel's halls. Agnes was said to be a housekeeper who lived and worked in the building during the early 1900s. Stories tell of Agnes's tragic end. She died suddenly under mysterious circumstances, and some believe she was murdered. Ever since, guests have reported hearing footsteps pacing the wooden floors late at night and catching glimpses of a shadowy figure watching from doorways. Some visitors have felt an inexplicable chill or the sensation of being gently touched when no one is nearby. Other paranormal encounters include the sound of a music box playing softly in empty rooms and lights flickering in the middle of the night. Staff and guests alike have reported doors opening and closing on their own, and occasional whispers just beyond hearing range. The history of the inn and these strange events are deeply intertwined, creating an atmosphere where the past refuses to fully rest. Whether Agnes's spirit lingers out of sorrow or unfinished business remains a mystery, but her presence is a well-known part of the Sir Sandford Fleming Inn experience. Number 4. The Fort Garry Hotel, Winnipeg, Manitoba. The Fort Garry Hotel stands in the heart of Winnipeg, known for its historic charm and century-old grandeur. But behind the chandeliers and velvet curtains lies one of the most unsettling reputations in the country. What happens inside room 202 is the reason many refuse to stay the night. Decades ago, a woman took her own life inside that room after learning of her husband's sudden death. Since then, guests have reported seeing a woman in black at the foot of their bed. Some wake up to find her silently staring. Others claim she cries through the night, her sobs drifting down the hallway and into nearby rooms. Even staff speak cautiously about room 202. One former employee claimed she was helping clean the room when the bathroom door slammed shut behind her. The lights went out and she felt something move past her in the dark. When she ran out, the hallway was completely still, as if nothing had happened. Another guest reported waking up with blood dripping from the walls. Hotel staff investigated but found nothing. Cameras inside the room have captured odd flashes of light, and on more than one occasion, objects have moved on their own, chairs shifting, faucets turning on. Some guests report being woken by pressure on their chest, as if someone is leaning on them. Others say they couldn't fall asleep at all, feeling watched from the moment they entered the room. The hotel has attempted to explain some of these experiences as superstition, but the number of complaints and first-hand accounts continue to grow. Beyond room 202, other areas of the hotel have their share of activity. Elevators sometimes stop on the second floor with no one inside. Cold spots follow guests through the hallways, and footsteps are heard when the building is empty. Fort Garry isn't just haunted, it's active. And whether the staff admits it or not, those who've stayed there know the truth. But while some spirits remain in the rooms where they died, others have no boundaries. The next hotel is quiet, remote, and beautiful on the outside. But guests report waking up in the middle of the night unable to move and hearing something breathing in the corner. Number 5. The Prince George Hotel, Halifax, Nova Scotia. In downtown Halifax, surrounded by shops and business towers, the Prince George Hotel offers luxury, fine dining, and a long-standing reputation for elegance. But beneath its polished image is a haunting that refuses to fade. The hotel sits near the site of an old school for girls, one that burned down in the 1800s. Legend says a young girl died in the fire, trapped inside the building when the smoke overwhelmed her. When the Prince George Hotel was built decades later, stories began to emerge and they haven't stopped since. Guests on the 6th floor, especially in room 612, often report lights flickering or turning on and off without warning. Several have said their television turns itself on in the middle of the night. Some report hearing faint giggling, followed by soft footsteps running across the carpet, but when they check, no one is there. A hotel worker once claimed he was cleaning the hallway when a small girl ran past him laughing. He turned the corner but found it empty. When he asked the front desk if someone's child had wandered out of their room, he was told there were no families on that floor at all. Security footage from that same hallway later showed a small blur moving past the camera, no distinct shape, just a strange distortion that set off the motion sensor. Housekeepers avoid being on the floor alone. One reported seeing handprints appear on a mirror seconds after she finished cleaning it. Others say their carts have been moved when left unattended, always a few inches closer to the stairwell. Even guests who never heard the ghost stories before staying there have reported waking up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was standing beside their bed. Not threatening, just watching. Prince George doesn't advertise its haunted reputation, but the locals know. And the staff no longer question the odd moments. They just offer guests a different room when they ask to be moved. But while some spirits appear and vanish quietly, the next hotel is known for louder visitors, doors that slam shut on their own, TVs that are static, and shadows that linger even when the lights are on. Number 6. The Algonquin Resort, St. Andrews, New Brunswick. Overlooking the Bay of Fundy in the quiet town of St. Andrews, the Algonquin Resort is known for its stunning architecture and seaside charm. Built in the late 1800s, this historic hotel has welcomed politicians, royalty, and celebrities. But behind its grand halls and coastal views, guests and staff have reported eerie occurrences that suggest not everyone who's checked in has left. One of the most well-known hauntings is tied to room 473. Guests staying there often complain of hearing footsteps pacing the room when no one is walking. Some have reported the sounds of heavy breathing or a pressure on their chest as they sleep. Others say their belongings are moved during the night, or the room feels unusually cold even in the summer months. Staff members tell stories of lights turning on and off by themselves. One employee claimed he saw a woman in a long dress walking through the hallway late at night. When he turned to greet her, she disappeared. A few guests have also mentioned seeing a woman in Victorian-era clothing near the main staircase. She's often described as silent, her face unreadable, and she vanishes the moment she's seen. The hotel also has reports of a phantom bellhop who appears briefly, then vanishes before reaching a room. Some guests have tried to tip him, only to realize he was never actually there. There's also a chilling story about the hotel's dining room. One night after hours, kitchen staff reported seeing chairs moving on their own and hearing the faint sound of piano music echoing through the space. No one was playing and the piano itself had been locked. The Algonquin may offer top-tier hospitality and breathtaking views, but many who stay say there's something they can't quite explain. A feeling that someone is walking just behind them. That the shadows near the fireplace don't behave normally. That someone is always awake in the halls even when the building is quiet. Number 7. The Empress Hotel, Victoria, British Columbia. The Fairmont Empress Hotel stands as one of Canada's most iconic buildings. Overlooking the harbor in Victoria, British Columbia, it has hosted royalty, presidents, and countless tourists for over a century. But behind the glamour and history, there are stories guests rarely read about in brochures. The most frequently reported spirit is believed to be that of the hotel's architect, Francis Rattenbury. After designing the Empress, Rattenbury's life took a tragic turn. He was murdered in England under scandalous circumstances, and many believe his spirit returned to the building he loved most. Multiple guests and staff have claimed to see a man in period clothing wandering the halls near the lobby, sometimes appearing lost, other times pausing to glance out the windows toward the harbor. There are other, more unsettling reports as well. Several rooms are said to experience strange activity, doors that close on their own, water taps that turn on in the middle of the night, and shadows that don't match any person in the room. One woman who stayed alone reported hearing her suitcase unzip while she was in bed. She turned on the light to find everything in her bag neatly placed on the floor, nothing stolen, just removed and organized. Staff have also spoken about room 503. Guests staying there have complained of hearing knocking on the walls from inside the room. Some have felt sudden cold drafts, despite sealed windows and working heat. One guest described waking up and seeing a woman in a long black dress sitting in the corner chair, staring straight ahead. She blinked and the chair was empty again. Another spirit that's often mentioned is a maid from the early 1900s. Housekeepers say they sometimes hear humming as they clean empty hallways. A few have felt a hand on their shoulder, only to turn around and find no one there. The Empress Hotel continues to operate as a high-end resort, and most who visit never encounter anything strange. But for those who do, the moments stay with them long after they check out. Because what walks these halls isn't always from this century. And while that spirit seems to linger peacefully, the next hotel is different. In that building, the energy is more aggressive. Guests leave with bruises they can't explain, nightmares that feel too real, and stories that even the staff refuse to discuss. Number 8. The James Bay Inn, Victoria, British Columbia. Tucked away just blocks from the Parliament buildings and the scenic coastline of Victoria, the James Bay Inn looks like a peaceful, historic retreat. But this modest hotel is home to one of the city's most quietly disturbing hauntings. In 1945, the famous Canadian artist Emily Carr died in what was once the hotel's maternity ward. The building was a hospital at the time, and her final days were spent within those walls. Years later, the property was converted back into a hotel, and her presence, according to guests and staff, never truly left. Visitors staying on the upper floor near what used to be the old hospital wing have reported strange activity. Lights flicker without reason. Drawers open by themselves. Some guests say they wake in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone is standing over them, watching silently. A few have reported seeing a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing at the end of the hall, only to have her vanish before they can speak. One guest, unaware of the hotel's history, checked into a room and immediately felt uneasy. She claimed the walls seemed to breathe and heard the distinct sound of footsteps pacing between her bed and the door throughout the night. When she mentioned it to the front desk in the morning, the clerk quietly asked, "Was it room 213? Other accounts come from staff, who describe cold spots that appear out of nowhere and sudden waves of sadness or pressure while cleaning specific rooms. One longtime employee admitted that she refuses to work the night shift anymore. Not after hearing whispering coming from behind a locked door and seeing a shadow pass under it when no one was inside. Although the hotel remains quiet about its haunted reputation, many who stay there leave reviews that hint at something more. Unexplained noises, restless nights, and a lingering feeling they were never truly alone. What makes the James Bay Inn so chilling is its stillness. There's no show, no drama, just the quiet presence of something that never moved on. Number 9. The Fairmont Hotel, Vancouver, Vancouver, British Columbia. In the heart of downtown Vancouver stands the towering and elegant Fairmont Hotel, Vancouver. Known for its luxury, celebrity guests, and historic architecture, the hotel has long been a symbol of wealth and class. But ask the staff and they'll tell you there's another side to the building, one that most guests never see. She's known as the Lady in Red. Her real name was Jenny Pearl Cox, a Vancouver socialite who died in the 1940s in a car accident near the hotel. At the time, she was staying there regularly and was well known in the community. After her death, guests and employees began reporting sightings of a woman in a long red dress wandering the hallways of the 14th floor. Elevators are said to stop there for no reason. Guests have reported seeing a woman standing in front of the doors, but when they step out, the hallway is empty. One man claimed he saw her reflection in the mirrored elevator, standing behind him, though no one was physically there. Several housekeepers have said they heard a woman humming softly in one of the corner rooms. When they entered, the room would be empty, but the bed sheets would be disturbed, and a faint scent of perfume would hang in the air. One particularly chilling incident involved a guest who woke up in the middle of the night to see a woman in red standing by the window. He thought she was a real person and shouted, only for her to turn, look directly at him, and vanish. The hotel has embraced the legend, with some referencing her presence in ghost tours and paranormal investigations. But many employees still speak of her quietly. Not out of fear but out of respect. Because while she's not known to harm anyone, her presence is undeniable. She appears without warning, disappears just as quickly, and leaves behind a cold heaviness that settles into the room. The Fairmont Hotel Vancouver may be polished and bright on the outside, but a part of it still belongs to Jenny. And while she walks calmly through the halls, the next hotel is far less gentle. In the rooms of that place, objects move on their own. Guests wake up with scratches. And staff won't speak of what's locked behind one particular door. Number 10. The Briars Resort and Spa, Jacksons Point, Ontario. Just an hour north of Toronto, nestled along the shores of Lake Simcoe, the Briars Resort and Spa offers a peaceful escape. Family-owned and operating for over a century, the property is surrounded by lush forests, winding trails, and calm waters. But behind the resort's relaxing appearance lies a series of strange, unexplainable occurrences that have made many question what truly lives there. The main building dates back to the 1800s, and much of its original structure remains intact. With that age comes stories, and the Briars have more than its share. Guests staying in the older parts of the resort frequently report footsteps in the hallways at night, even when no one is staying in the neighboring rooms. Doors creak open slowly and lights flicker for no reason. A few guests have described a sudden coldness sweeping across their room, followed by a sensation of being watched. Staff members speak of a woman in white who's been seen walking through the gardens and the library. She never speaks. She never makes a sound. She simply passes through and vanishes when approached. Some believe she may have been part of the family that once owned the estate, still wandering the grounds after all these years. One former employee recalled entering an unused guest room to find the furniture rearranged. Thinking it was a mistake, she asked the front desk if anyone had been checked in. They hadn't. But the security footage showed the door opening during the night with no one entering or leaving. Another unsettling story involves the inn's cellar. Staff avoid it unless absolutely necessary. Several have reported hearing whispers coming from the corners, or the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs when no one else is around. Despite these incidents, the resort remains a popular destination. Many guests don't experience anything unusual, but those who do remember it forever. They speak of waking in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone had just left the room, or worse, that they were still there, watching silently from the corner. The Briars aren't violent, but it is persistent. And for those sensitive to such things, it's clear that something or someone never checked out. Number 11. The Caribou Hotel, Carcross, Yukon. Tucked deep in the Yukon wilderness, in the small village of Carcross, the Caribou Hotel has stood since the early 1900s. It survived fires, harsh winters, and decades of isolation. But what keeps people talking isn't just its rugged charm. It's the stories of what or who remains inside. The most famous spirit associated with the Caribou Hotel is that of Bessie Gideon. She and her husband owned the hotel during its earliest days. After his death, Bessie ran it alone until she passed away in 1933. Her funeral was held inside the building, and ever since, guests and employees have claimed she never truly left. People hear footsteps in the halls late at night when no one is staying on the upper floors. Doors slam shut without warning. Lights in the stairwell flicker even when the power is steady. Some guests have reported hearing soft humming, only to find themselves completely alone. Staff describe her presence as strong. One manager admitted that sometimes when locking up for the night, he feels someone walking just behind him. A few brave guests who've stayed in the upper rooms say they've woken to see an older woman sitting in the chair near the window, quietly looking out at the trees. When they blink, she's gone. There's also talk of a male presence in the basement. Workers have reported sudden cold spots, tools disappearing, and strange banging noises with no source. No one stays down there longer than necessary. Despite its remote location, the Caribou Hotel draws visitors from around the world. Some come for the history. Others come because they've heard the stories and want to see if the legends are true. The locals take the hauntings seriously. They speak of Bessie with respect. They don't mock the spirits. They've lived with them for generations and know better than to ignore the signs. As isolated as the Caribou Hotel is, the energy there is loud. But what happens when that energy turns from observation to aggression? The next hotel has been described by some as cursed. Its past is tied to pain, and what lives there now makes sure no one forgets it. Number 12, the Walper Hotel, Kitchener, Ontario. Standing tall in downtown Kitchener since 1893, the Walper Hotel has hosted politicians, artists, and performers for over a century. It's a building steeped in history, elegance, and quiet mystery. But not all the stories from the Walper are found in its guest book. Some are whispered in the hallways, told in lowered voices by staff and longtime visitors. The hotel has undergone several renovations over the years, but some areas seem untouched by time and by something else entirely. Room 309 has drawn the most attention. Guests have complained of strange tapping sounds in the walls, cold bursts of air even with no windows open, and the distinct sensation of being watched. One woman reported waking in the night, unable to breathe, as if someone were pressing down on her chest. When she managed to turn on the light, the room was completely still, but the pressure didn't disappear until sunrise. She left early and refused to stay another night. Staff tell stories of hearing voices from empty rooms. One cleaner said she was vacuuming a hallway when she heard someone say her name from behind. When she turned around, no one was there. She checked each room, but the floor was vacant. During one event in the ballroom, several guests claimed to see a figure standing in the balcony above, motionless, dressed in black. Security was called, but when they checked the balcony, it was empty and locked from the inside. The elevator has its own set of strange habits. It occasionally stops on the 4th floor with no one inside. Cameras have recorded it opening and closing on its own. Some believe it's the spirit of a guest who died in the hotel decades ago and never left. Even employees who aren't easily shaken admit there's a heaviness on certain floors. It's not always menacing, but it's constant, like something is aware, observing everyone who walks through. The Walper doesn't advertise itself as haunted, but those who've stayed there say otherwise. The rooms may be comfortable, the service top-notch, but something else walks the corridors at night. Number 13, the Walker House Hotel, Southampton, Ontario. The Walker House Hotel is the oldest operating hotel in Bruce County, first opening its doors in the mid-1800s. Located near Lake Huron in the quiet town of Southampton, this historic building has served as an inn, tavern, and gathering place for generations. But its long history carries more than just stories of settlers and sailors. It also holds accounts of ghostly encounters that have unsettled both guests and staff. The most common reports come from the upper floors. Guests staying there have described hearing heavy boots pacing up and down the hallway during the night. When they check, the corridor is empty. The sounds continue as if someone is marching endlessly just beyond sight. There are frequent complaints of doors opening on their own. In some rooms, lights flicker without cause and the temperature drops suddenly, even during the summer months. One man staying alone claimed he heard someone whisper his name while he was in bed. He got up, thinking someone had entered the room, but the door was locked from the inside. Staff have shared their own disturbing experiences. One employee refused to clean a certain room after hearing knocking from inside the wardrobe and seeing it swing open on its own. Another said she saw a figure in old-fashioned clothing walk past the bar mirror late one night, but no one else was in the building. There is also a local legend connected to the hotel involving a sailor who drowned in the nearby waters of Lake Huron. Some believe his spirit found its way back to the Walker House, where he had once stayed while docked in town. Several guests have reported waking up to the sound of dripping water, even though their taps were turned off. Others describe wet footprints leading from the hallway into their room with no explanation. Though the hotel embraces its rich history, it rarely mentions the hauntings in its promotions. Yet, those who visit for a peaceful night often leave with a story they didn't expect to tell. The Walker House doesn't shout. It lingers. It whispers, and for some, that's more terrifying than anything loud. Number 14. The Ottawa Jail Hotel, Carleton County Jail, Ottawa, Ontario. Although technically labeled a hostel today, the building that once held the Carleton County Jail remains one of the most terrifying overnight stays in the country. Many still refer to it as the Ottawa Jail Hotel, and despite its shift into tourist lodging, nothing has erased its history of suffering and death. Built in 1862, this jail witnessed over a century of executions, solitary confinements, and overcrowded cells. Men, women, and even children were imprisoned here, many under harsh conditions. Some were executed on the top floor, including Patrick James Whalen, whose ghost is said to still linger. Guests brave enough to spend the night in the former cells often report chains rattling, doors slamming without warning, and whispers echoing through the corridors. One of the most disturbing experiences happens in the old death row area. People have described being paralyzed in their beds, hearing footsteps approaching slowly only for nothing to appear. Multiple guests have complained of sudden cold gusts sweeping across the room despite no open windows. Others wake up feeling breath on their faces, or the sensation of someone lying beside them, though the bed remains visibly empty. The former gallows remain intact on the upper floor. Those who visit the execution site often feel uneasy, lightheaded, or physically sick. Some have described seeing a shadow fall across the floor, only to look up and find no source for it. One staff member confessed to hearing the unmistakable sound of rope tightening even when the building was empty. Security footage and photographs taken by guests have occasionally shown figures in the background. Blurred, gray forms with no identifiable face. Sometimes these images capture the outline of someone standing just beyond a doorway or at the end of a bunk. The building is still open to curious travelers, especially those drawn by its haunted reputation. But the staff know better than to mock what lingers here. They've heard the stories. Some have lived there. And if you think this is where the horror ends, there is still one final hotel. A place where the past refuses to stay buried. Where guests don't just see shadows, they hear screams. They feel hands. They wake up marked. And many say once you've stayed there, something follows you home. Number 15. Fort Garry Hotel, Winnipeg, Manitoba. The Fort Garry Hotel stands as one of the most iconic landmarks in Winnipeg. Built in 1913 by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway, it was once the height of luxury for wealthy travelers crossing Canada. But behind the elegance and historic charm lies one of the darkest and most persistent hauntings in the country. The most infamous room in the hotel is Room 202. Staff and guests have long reported violent disturbances tied to this room. According to legend, a woman checked in and received news that her husband had died in a car accident. In despair, she took her own life inside the room's closet. Since then, Room 202 has rarely been quiet. Guests who stay there often complain of waking up to the sound of sobbing. Not a vague noise but clear, heartbroken weeping coming from the corner of the room. Some say the cries echo into the hallway, reaching other rooms on the same floor. Others report blood appearing on the walls or at the edge of the bed, only to vanish when they turn on the lights. One of the hotel's front desk managers once received a call from Room 202 in the middle of the night. When she answered, there was no voice, just static. Security checked the room only to find it empty. The phone had been off the hook and the door locked from the inside. Other rooms aren't free from activity either. In the lounge and main hall, Guests have described cold breezes sweeping across their legs. Some have seen a woman in a long black dress floating down the grand staircase, her face pale, her expression distant. Staff avoid the basement after dark. Several have heard footsteps pacing in the storage area, and voices whispering their names. Motion sensors are frequently triggered with no one present. The hotel has brought in paranormal investigators, who've captured unexplained EMF spikes, temperature drops, and disembodied voices recorded on EVP. Despite its hauntings, the Fort Garry continues to welcome thousands of visitors each year. Many come for the history and leave untouched. But some check out with more than just luggage. Because in room 202, heartbreak still lives. And sometimes it wants company. Now that you've heard the darkest legends of Canada's haunted hotels, a warning: these stories don't always end where the road does. Sometimes the things you hear about, read about, or even laugh off, they find you. Not in the hallways or stairwells, but in your dreams. Or in that moment when you're finally alone. But before we close the door completely, there's one last thing you need to hear. You've heard the footsteps. You've seen the shadows. From the frozen Yukon to the quiet streets of Halifax, these hotels are more than resting places. They are reminders that some stories refuse to end. These aren't just old buildings with creaky floors and flickering lights. These are places where people have felt unseen hands. Where sobs echo through walls that should be silent. Where hotel doors open by themselves and something waits on the other side. If you ever book a stay at one of these haunted hotels, ask yourself, are you alone? Or are you just the next guest in a room that already has someone in it? So, which hotel chilled you the most? Which story made you pause even just for a second? Tell us in the comments. We read them all. And trust me, you're not the only one feeling that strange cold breath on the back of your neck right now. Subscribe for more real horror. Because next time we're heading somewhere darker. Somewhere colder. And next time you might not be able to leave.